The mail carrier stopped me on my porch last Sunday morning. "Ma'am, I hope this isn't out of line, but do you know your brother has been collecting your mail every week while you're at church? I want you to stay with me until the very end of this story, because what I found out after that question changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Please like this video and tell me in the comments what city you're listening from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. My name is Dorothy, and I am 68 years old. I live in the same pale yellow house in Dayton, Ohio, where my husband, Walter, and I raised our 2 boys over 37 years. Walter passed away from a heart attack 22 months ago, and the house became mine, along with the quiet that comes after 40 years of sharing a life with someone. It wasn't a sad quiet. Exactly. It was the kind of quiet that takes some getting used to, like sleeping on your own side of the bed again after decades of sprawling across both. My brother, Raymond, is 4 years older than me. Growing up, Raymond and I were close the way siblings are when they're the only 2 children in a house that didn't have much. We shared everything: a bathroom, a television, Sunday dinners, the weight of parents who worked constantly and loved in the quiet way that working people do. I trusted Raymond the way you trust someone who has been part of your life since before you had memories. After Walter died, Raymond stepped in. He helped me with the gutters. He came over when the furnace made a strange sound. He sat with me through the worst nights of that first winter when the grief felt like something physical pressing on my chest. I was grateful. I told him so often. I meant it. Every Sunday morning, I attend the 9 o'clock service at Calvary United Methodist. I've gone for 23 years. I leave the house at 8:40, and I'm usually home by 11:15. Raymond knew this schedule better than anyone. He'd driven me to church himself during the months after Walter's death when I wasn't steady enough to drive. The first strange thing happened in late November. I keep my important documents, the deed to this house, Walter's life insurance policy, our investment account statements, in a fireproof lockbox on the floor of the bedroom closet. Walter had insisted on that box, his peace of mind system, he called it. After he passed, I kept everything exactly as he'd arranged it. I had no reason to open the box often. Everything was in order. One afternoon, I went looking for a copy of our property tax statement for a refinance question my son, Michael, had asked about over the phone. When I opened the box, the documents weren't in their usual order. Walter had organized everything with labeled manila envelopes. The deed was in its envelope, but the envelope had been opened and resealed. Not perfectly. The flap was slightly off. I stood in my closet for a long moment, running my finger along that flap, telling myself I was imagining things. I probably opened it myself months ago and forgot. Grief does strange things to memory. I put it back and didn't mention it to anyone. The second thing happened in December. I noticed a file folder was missing from my desk drawer. It wasn't an important folder. It held photocopies of some financial statements from 2 years ago, but I knew where everything in that desk was kept. Walter had teased me about it. "Dorothy," he'd say, "you could find a paperclip in the dark in this house." I searched every drawer. The filing cabinet in the spare bedroom. The kitchen counter. The folder was simply gone. I mentioned it to Raymond when he stopped by that week. He shrugged, suggested I might have thrown it away without remembering. "Maybe you thought it was old mail," he said, patting my hand. "It's a lot to manage on your own. You sure you don't want me to help you organize things?" I said no. I was managing fine. But that phrase stayed with me. A lot to manage on your own. He'd been saying some version of it for months. I hadn't noticed the pattern until that moment. Then came that Sunday in January when I came home from church and found Gary Mitchell standing at the end of my driveway with a stack of mail in his hand. Gary has delivered on my street for 11 years. He knows my name, knows I take in his dog when he goes to visit his daughter. in Columbus. He had an expression on his face I'd never seen before. Careful and uncomfortable. The look of someone who's decided to say something they've been holding back. "Dorothy," he said, "I hope this isn't out of line." He handed me my mail. "But do you know, your brother has been collecting your mail every week while you're at church?" The ground seemed to tilt slightly under my feet. "What do you mean?" "Every Sunday, maybe 20 or 30 minutes after I see your car leave, he pulls into the driveway, takes whatever's in the box. I've seen it 4, 5 times now, maybe more. I thought maybe you'd asked him to, but last week, something made me look twice." He paused. He sat in his car for a long time, going through it, before he drove away. I thanked Gary. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table and looked at the mail in my hand. A water bill, a charity donation request, a statement from the brokerage where Walter and I had kept our retirement accounts. I thought about the lockbox with the resealed envelope. I thought about the missing folder. I thought about Raymond sitting in his car, going through my mail every Sunday morning while I was in church, singing hymns and drinking bad coffee in the fellowship hall. Why would he need my mail? What was he looking for? What had he already found? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark in the bedroom I'd shared with Walter and made myself think clearly instead of emotionally. I was 68 years old. This was my house, paid off 3 years ago. Walter's life insurance had been substantial. Our retirement savings were modest but solid. I was not a wealthy woman, but I was comfortable. Raymond knew exactly what I had. He'd helped me sort through Walter's estate. At 2 in the morning, I got up and went to the desk. I pulled out every account statement I could find and began laying them side by side on the kitchen table, tracing numbers across months. It took me 2 hours. But by 4 o'clock I found it. A withdrawal from the investment account? $900. 3 months ago. The kind of amount that's easy to miss on a monthly statement. Not small enough to be invisible. Not large enough to set off an alarm in a grieving woman who wasn't scrutinizing every line. I cross-referenced against my own records. I had not made that withdrawal. I had not authorized anyone else to make it. I checked again. Then a third time. $900 was gone, and I had not taken it. I sat with that knowledge until the sun came up. I could call Raymond. I could ask him directly. I could already hear his voice calm, reasonable, shifting the blame back to my memory. "Are you sure, Dorothy? You might have moved money around and forgotten. You've had a hard year. Remember when you couldn't find your car keys for 2 days?" His response was already written in my mind before I ever dialed. I needed proof first. Real, undeniable proof. And I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening before I showed my hand. The idea came to me while I was watering my kitchen plants. My son, Michael's neighbor, had mentioned something last Thanksgiving about a small camera he'd used to check on his house while he was away on vacation. A simple device. Inexpensive. Battery-powered. I opened my laptop and found exactly what I needed within 10 minutes. I ordered it that morning. It arrived 3 days later. I read every word of the instruction guide at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my reading glasses. By the end of the afternoon, I understood exactly how it worked. Small enough to fit in my hand. 12 hours of recording time. Motion activated. The image was clear and sharp. I tested it twice before Sunday. I hid it in the built-in bookshelf in my front hallway, tucked behind a ceramic vase Walter had brought home from a work trip to Nashville years ago. From that angle, it would capture anyone who came through the front door, the hallway, and the entrance to the living room where my desk sat. The Saturday night before, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Raymond's face, the face I'd known for 64 years. The face that had sat across from me at our parents' Thanksgiving table, that had stood beside me at my wedding, that had held it together at Walter's funeral when I couldn't. I kept telling myself there was an explanation. There had to be. But I also thought about that word he'd been using. Managing. You sure you're managing on your own? That's a lot to manage. Let me help you manage things. And underneath the kindness in his voice, there had always been something else. Something that sounded, when I replayed it now, less like concern and more like appraisal. Sunday morning, I activated the camera at 8:20. I placed my purse by the door, my coat on the hook, and I left for church at my usual time. Except I didn't go to church. I drove around the block twice, parked on a side street 3 houses down with a clear view of my driveway. And I waited. At 9:17, Raymond's silver sedan pulled into my driveway. He sat in the car for less than a minute. Then he got out. He had a key, my spare key, which I'd given him the week after Walter died in case of emergencies. He let himself in through the front door, like he owned the place. He was inside for 26 minutes. I know, because I watched the clock on my dashboard the entire time, barely breathing. When he left, he had a manila envelope under his arm. He got into his car, reversed out of my driveway, and drove away. I waited another 10 minutes. Then I went home. The camera's footage took me 15 minutes to download. My hands shook the entire time. When I finally pressed play and saw Raymond walk through my front door, something in my chest cracked open, not dramatically, not loudly, just a small, clean break, the way ice splits when the temperature drops. I watched him go straight to my desk. He knew exactly where everything was. He opened the bottom drawer first, flipped through folders with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. He photographed several documents with his phone. I could see the screen light up, again and again. Then he moved to the closet where my lockbox sat. He had a key for that too. He'd helped me find a replacement key months ago after I'd misplaced mine. I'd been grateful at the time. He spent 4 minutes at the lockbox. He removed the manila folder containing the deed to the house, and he photographed every page. Then he removed something else, a document I couldn't identify from the camera angle, and he didn't photograph it. He folded it and put it in the envelope he'd brought with him. Then came the moment that stopped my heart. He made a phone call. Standing in my bedroom, in the room where Walter had slept beside me for 37 years, Raymond called someone and spoke clearly enough that the camera's audio picked up every word. "I've got the deed copy and the account transfer form," he said. "Carol, if we time this right, we get the power of attorney filed before the boys even realize what's happened. Once we have that, we handle the house separately." A pause. Then, "She won't fight it. She's been having memory problems. I've been laying the groundwork for months. Her own sons think she's slipping." Another pause. And then he laughed. A short, easy laugh I'd heard 10,000 times. "She trusts me completely." I paused the video. I sat in the silence of my kitchen, and I let the full weight of it settle. Raymond, my brother, the person who had sat with me when my husband died, who had called me every week for the past 1.5 years, who had been, I now understood, systematically building a case for my incompetence, while simultaneously positioning himself for legal control of everything I owned. Memory problems. Laying the groundwork for months. Her own sons think she's slipping. I thought back over every conversation, every gentle suggestion that I was forgetting things. Every time he'd mentioned to Michael or to my younger son, Patrick, that Mom seemed confused the other day, didn't she? Every time I dismissed something as grief or age, only to find out later the thing I was looking for had genuinely been moved. I had not been losing my mind. I had been being managed. I saved 3 copies of that video. One on a USB drive that I gave to my neighbor, Ruth Carpenter, with instructions to keep it somewhere safe and not tell Raymond she had it. One I emailed to myself, and to a second email account I created that afternoon. The following morning, I drove to the offices of my attorney, Frank Delacroix, who had handled Walter's estate. I showed him the footage. I showed him the bank statement with the unauthorized withdrawal. I told him everything, starting with Gary the mail carrier and ending with Raymond's phone call. Frank watched the video twice. When he looked up, his expression was grave. "Dorothy, this is elder financial abuse. The documentation you have is strong. The withdrawal needs bank confirmation. But that video is unambiguous." He named himself explicitly. What would he have been able to do with the deed copy and whatever that other document was? Frank was quiet for a moment. If he had a forged power of attorney or was attempting to file for guardianship, having copies of your property documents would allow him to proceed quickly once he had legal authority over your affairs. The fact that he mentioned filing before your sons realized it suggests he was moving towards something with a tight timeline. I asked the question I had to ask. "Do my sons think I'm declining?" Frank folded his hands. "That's something you should establish formally. I want you to see Dr. Laura Hendricks. She's a neuropsychologist. I've worked with her on 3 cases like this. She'll conduct a full cognitive evaluation, put her findings in writing. That report will be the first thing we file if Raymond tries to move forward with anything." I made the appointment that afternoon. I was also angry in a way I hadn't been in a very long time. Not a hot, sloppy anger, but something cooler and more purposeful. Raymond had been counting on my trust, on my grief, on the fact that a woman alone in a house, still raw from losing her husband, might not look too carefully at the people she loved. He had miscalculated. Dr. Hendricks saw me 2 days later. 3.5 hours of testing, memory sequences, pattern recognition, verbal reasoning, current events, problem solving. She was brisk and professional and never once spoke to me as though I were fragile. When it was over, she shook my hand and told me she'd have the written report ready within 5 days. The report arrived on a Thursday. Above average performance across all cognitive domains for my age group. No evidence of memory impairment. No indicators of cognitive decline. Executive functioning intact. I read it 3 times. Then I put it in a new manila envelope and labeled it in large letters with a black marker, Exhibit A. Meanwhile, I'd been paying attention. I noticed Raymond called me twice that week, casual calls, chatty, asking how I was feeling, mentioning that Michael had seemed worried about me recently, dropping crumbs of concern like someone maintaining a trail. At the end of the second call, he brought it up directly. "Dorothy, I've been thinking, maybe it's time to get you some extra support. There are these wonderful senior services, people who can help manage finances, make sure bills are paid on time. Would you be open to talking about it?" "I manage my finances perfectly well, Raymond. Of course you do. I just want to make sure you have help if you need it. I'll think about it," I said. And I hung up and called Frank. Frank had filed a fraud alert with my bank. The account manager had reviewed the $900 withdrawal and confirmed the transaction had been initiated through a form that bore my signature. But when compared against verified signature samples, showed significant inconsistencies. The bank was cooperating fully. We now had documented forgery. The following Sunday, I installed the second camera. This one was smaller, placed behind a framed photo in my bedroom, angled toward the closet and the lockbox. I wanted complete coverage. I was done being cautious by half measures. I also changed my locks. I called a locksmith on Friday afternoon, told him I'd lost my spare key, which was true in a sense, and had every lock in the house replaced by Friday evening. I mailed Raymond a brief note on Saturday. "Raymond, had to change the locks due to a security concern. We'll get you a new spare key soon. Love, Dorothy." Friendly. Unremarkable. A delay tactic, nothing more. 3 days later, Raymond knocked on my front door. I'd been expecting it. I opened the door, but not the screen. He looked surprised. Dorothy, what's going on? I came by Sunday, and my key didn't work. I sent you a note. Security issue. I'll get you a new one made soon. His expression shifted just for a second, something tightening around his eyes. Is everything okay? You seem tense. I'm fine. Did you need something? I wanted to check on you. You've seemed off lately. He paused. I talked to Michael. He's worried too. About what specifically? Just you're alone a lot. You've had a hard 2 years. It's natural to need more support. I looked at my brother's 64 years of knowing this face and I said, I appreciate the concern, Raymond. I'll call you soon. I closed the door. I engaged the deadbolt. Then I sat down on my couch and allowed myself 3 minutes of feeling the full weight of that conversation. The practiced nature of it. The way he'd already spoken to Michael. Already continued building his case. 3 minutes. Then I picked up my phone and called Frank. He's escalating, I said. What do we do? Frank had been ready for this. We move first. The following Tuesday morning, we filed a complaint with the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department for financial elder abuse. We brought the video footage, the bank's forensic analysis of the forged signature, and Dr. Hendrix's cognitive evaluation. The detective who took our statement, a woman named Sergeant Pryor, watched the video twice without expression and then looked at me and said, Mrs. Sims, you did everything right. We also filed a preemptive motion with the probate court, establishing my cognitive competency on record, attaching Dr. Hendrix's report. If Raymond attempted to file for guardianship or power of attorney, he would be walking into a wall of documentation that directly contradicted every claim he'd been building for months. Frank called me 2 hours after we left the courthouse. Raymond has been contacted by investigators. He's retained an attorney. That evening, Raymond called me. I let it go to voicemail. His message was calm, measured, the voice of a reasonable man who was deeply hurt by a misunderstanding. Dorothy, I don't know what's happening, but I would never. I have only ever tried to look out for you. Whatever someone has told you, whatever you think you found, please call me. Please. We're family. I listened to it once, then I saved it to the evidence file. His attorney contacted Frank the following week with a proposal. Raymond would return the document he'd removed from my lockbox, which turned out to be a blank power of attorney form he'd taken from Walter's estate file, apparently intending to forge my signature on it. And he would agree to repay the $900, with the understanding that I would not pursue criminal charges. In exchange, I would acknowledge that Raymond had acted out of misguided concern rather than malicious intent. I told Frank to decline. The case took 4 months to move through the system. Raymond's attorney tried several approaches. He argued that Raymond had implied permission to access the house. He argued that the $900 had been a misunderstanding. He presented statements from Carol and 2 family acquaintances, suggesting I had been forgetful and confused in the months following Walter's death. Frank presented Dr. Hendrix's evaluation, the forensic handwriting analysis from the bank, the surveillance footage, and Sergeant Pryor's testimony. He presented Gary Mitchell, my mail carrier, who described what he had witnessed every Sunday for at least 5 weeks. He presented Ruth Carpenter, who testified that I had given her a copy of the evidence the day after recording it, demonstrating both clarity of mind and methodical planning. Raymond took the stand in his own defense. He was composed, remorseful seeming, skilled at appearing misunderstood. He said he had been trying to protect his sister. He said he had been worried. He said the withdrawal was a loan he'd intended to repay and had simply not discussed with me clearly enough. Then Frank played the video. The courtroom heard Raymond's voice, steady and unhurried, in my dead husband's bedroom. She trusts me completely. The judge, a 61-year-old man named the Honorable Douglas Fry, watched the footage without any visible expression. When it finished, he asked Raymond's attorney if there was any additional context that might explain the statement in its entirety. The attorney said there was not. Raymond was found guilty of financial elder abuse, forgery, and unauthorized access to a dwelling. He was sentenced to 2 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole at 18 months contingent on completion of a mandatory financial crime rehabilitation program. He was ordered to pay full restitution of the $900 plus $4,200 in damages. His access to my property, my accounts, and any contact with me was permanently restricted by court order. Carol sat in the back of the courtroom for every day of the trial and never once looked me in the eye. My sons, Michael and Patrick, had not known the extent of what Raymond had been doing. When I showed them the evidence in the weeks after he was arrested, Michael went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Mom, he told me you'd forgotten to pay your property taxes. He told me twice." Patrick, who lives in Charlotte, drove up the following weekend and stayed for 10 days. He went through every account with me, set up alerts on every financial statement, and made me promise to call him immediately if anything ever felt wrong again. It took several months for the shock of it to settle into something I could carry without it dragging me down. What Raymond had taken from me wasn't just $900 or the sense of safety in my own home. He'd tried to take my credibility. He'd spent the better part of a year methodically undermining my confidence in my own memory, talking to my sons about my decline, building a paper trail of a woman who couldn't manage on her own all so that when he finally moved, no one would question him. He'd used my grief over Walter as cover. He'd used my trust as a tool. But here is what he hadn't counted on. He hadn't counted on Gary Mitchell, who had 11 years of watching out for the people on his route. He hadn't counted on a 68-year-old woman who reads instruction manuals carefully and hides cameras behind ceramic vases. He hadn't counted on the fact that the same thoroughness that let Walter tease me about finding paperclips in the dark was the same thoroughness that kept clean records, noticed misplaced envelopes, and tracked account withdrawals down to the last dollar. He had looked at a widow in a pale yellow house and seen someone who was past her prime, easy to manage, too softened by grief to pay close attention. He was wrong about all of it. 2 years later, I still live in this house. I painted the front door red last spring, which Walter always wanted to do, and I always vetoed. I joined a financial literacy group at the senior center and volunteer as a resource for other widows and widowers navigating their finances for the first time alone. I've spoken to 3 women in the past year who called me after recognizing something familiar in their own situations. A family member with access to their home, small amounts of money that didn't add up, the slow erosion of their own confidence in their memories. I tell all of them the same thing. Your memory is not the problem. Document everything. Start with whatever is bothering you, even if it seems small, especially if it seems small. The small things are where it starts. Michael calls me every Sunday now. Not because he thinks I need checking on, because he wants to talk to his mother. There's a difference, and both of us know it. Raymond was denied parole at 18 months. He'll serve his full 2 years. When 2 PS. Perdices. The monthly restitution payments come reliably, and I put every cent into a scholarship fund at Calvary United Methodist for first-generation college students. I wanted something good to come from it. Walter would have liked that. If there's anyone watching this who has a strange feeling in their gut about something about who's been in your house, about a number that doesn't look right, about a person whose concern has started to feel like something with a different name, I want you to trust that feeling. You are not too old. You are not confused. You are paying attention. And that is exactly what you should be doing. Thank you for listening to my story. Stay safe And please, take care of each other.